All right, so in the wake of the Highland Park mass shooting over the July 4th holiday weekend, conservatives are back at it again, pulling every single thing that they physically can out of their asses in order to not talk about the proliferation of guns as a potential correlative cause for the mass shootings that we have here in the United States, and that somehow magically don't happen around the rest of the developed world in the same level that we have here in the US. So I got a couple different clips lined up here of some of the most deranged takes that I heard in response to this, but here to start us off, we got Bill Bennett, apparently a Fox News contributor, suggesting that maybe exorcists are what's needed to prevent mass shootings. So let's go ahead and watch this clip.
Not sure we're going deep enough. I think you need police, you need parents for sure, you need schools, you need to clean up social media. You need all that, but you may need an exorcist too. Before your audience shakes its head on that, if you look at these boys, these men, these young men, they have deeply spiritual problems. Deeply. If you go into the labyrinthine caves of the internet, way down, and I don't recommend it, it's ugly stuff. And these guys dwell there. They live there. They drench themselves in it. And it's as ugly and evil as it gets. We're the ministers. We're the rabbis, the priests. Look, I don't want to suggest something that would seem farcical to a lot of your audience, but I don't think that the domain of religion ought to be involved here. It's a deeply spiritual void, I think, that these young men have in their hearts and their souls, and I think it needs to be addressed. And I don't think we get at it, frankly, with these externalities, as important as some of them may be, and they may be. We need to do it all, but we need to do more. I'm not sure we're
Okay, so, I guess reasonable solution here. No, it's not anything to do with the guns. No, we don't need to more substantially invest in mental health in this country. We don't need to ensure that people feel as though they have some, attachment to their community or anything that would, materially have an effect on the problem of mass shootings. No, we need exorcists, okay? We need religious authority figures within every single child's life. Now, first of all, obviously that's complete and utter nonsense. We live in the United States. We are an extremely religious country. A vast majority of a lot of these mass shootings are taking place either in religious communities or by people who grew up in religious households. So, there's absolutely no reason to believe that a lack of God in people's lives is going to prevent mass shootings or something or going to cause mass shootings or something like that. Just completely ridiculous. The idea that just sitting down and telling somebody, hey, did you know that God says that it's actually a sin against him to go and murder a bunch of school children or innocent parade goers or wherever the situation may be. The idea that that's going to have any material effect is just really laughable at face value, but this is just starting us off, okay? So there's Bill Bennett on Fox News suggesting exorcisms are needed. Now we move on to Laura Ingram pulling out a historic classic here, blaming marijuana usage and, I guess in her view, abuse of marijuana potentially leading to these mass shootings. So let's go ahead and hear what she had to say.
But instead of selling fear and division, wouldn't it be nice if we all began to focus on solutions? Don't people want solutions? I sense they do. Now, on the mass shooting in Illinois, indications are that Robert Crimo was a regular pot user. Now, one look at him, and to the untrained eye, he looks like a complete psychotic. Have you ever seen anyone looking like him? And what can regular pot use trigger in young men in particular? Psychosis and other violent personality changes. Not everyone, but a significant percentage. Now,
Okay, so I would like to hear a follow-up on that, on exactly what the significant percentage is that she's referring to here, because, listen, marijuana, first of all, is not completely legalized here in the United States. It definitely should be, but, the easy way to refute this argument is just look at other countries around the world, Canada, or, countries within Europe that have more free use of marijuana, that have legalized or decriminalized marijuana use. Do they have the same amount of mass shootings? Do they have the same amount of young men resorting to violence in their lives? No, they don't, because there's no correlation between marijuana usage and going out and doing goddamn mass shootings. Just complete perfect example here of correlation without any causation or any reason to believe that there's a link here between marijuana use and going and doing a mass shooting. I smoke marijuana. I know plenty of people in my personal life who smoke marijuana on a regular basis. Believe it or not, somehow never had the urge to go out and do a violent mass shooting or anything like that. Most of the time, you just want to eat on some, food food or snacks or whatever, watch a movie or TV or whatever the fuck, don't need to resort to violence. So, on that front, just completely ridiculous. Again, the difference in the variables that we're accounting for here, she was saying at the beginning of that clip, she wants to see actual solutions, and the one that she proposes there is a variable that has absolutely nothing to do with the mass shootings, right? Again, you can compare us to any other OECD nations that have legalized or decriminalized marijuana. They don't have mass shootings. Why? Because they don't have the same amount of the proliferation of guns in their countries as we do here in the United States. But again, that's just Laura Ingram there on Fox News. We got another Fox News demon here, Tucker Carlson, weighing in, and he is similarly going to blame drugs. In this case, he's focusing more in on prescription drugs, and also a whole host of other, asinine explanations for why mass shootings are occurring. So let's go ahead and check in with this absolute demon.
Would you sell a gun to that guy? Does he seem like a nutcase? Of course he does. So why didn't anyone raise an alarm? Well, maybe because he didn't stand out. Maybe because there are a lot of young men in America who suddenly look and act a lot like this guy.
Okay, first of all, already looking down at the chyron here, I know that I'm cutting it off, but it basically just says Robert Crimo raised a lot of red flags. Okay, yeah, he did raise a lot of red flags, not because of inherently his appearance or anything like that, but he had previous interactions with law enforcement. I think there was one specific incident where they actually went to his home and confiscated his knives that he had because he was threatening to kill a bunch of people. And so, putting that chyron down here at the bottom saying that he was raising a lot of red flags, okay, do you support red flag laws that would make it so that a guy like this is flagged when he has previous interactions with law enforcement that could prevent him from going out and legally buying the firearm, which he did? I mean, again, he doesn't support those things. He doesn't support national red flag laws being implemented. So why are you even bringing that up? Why are you bringing up the fact that there were tons of red flags that could have been, put in place to stop this guy from getting the guns in the first place if you don't actually agree with the simple policy solution to address that specific issue? But this is just the beginning of the clip, setting it up with absolutely ridiculous framing here.
It's not an attack, it's just true. Like Crimo, they inhabit a solitary fantasy world of social media, porn, and video games. They're high.
Classic, video games, actually still blaming video games. Again, go check in with any other OECD nation, Australia, the UK, Canada, France, Germany. Do their young kids play video games, violent video games? Yeah, they do. They don't have mass shootings at the same level that we do because they don't have the guns to go out and do those mass shootings with, okay? Nothing to do with violence in video games or anything like that. Just, it's like they're stuck in the fucking 80s or the 90s right now.
On government-endorsed weed. Smoke some more, it's good for you. They're numbed by the endless psychotropic drugs that are handed out at every school in the country by crackpots posing as counselors. And of course, they're angry. They know that their lives will not be better than their parents. They'll be worse. That's all but guaranteed. They know that. They're not that stupid. And yet the authorities in their lives, mostly women, never stops lecturing them about their so-called privilege. You're male, you're privileged. Imagine that. Try to imagine an unhealthier, unhappier life than that. So a lot of young men in America are going nuts. Are you surprised? And by the way, a shockingly large number of them have been prescribed psychotropic drugs by their doctors, SSRIs or antidepressants. And that would include quite a few mass shooters. And keep in mind, again, these drugs are meant to prevent crazy behavior.
Okay, so gonna go ahead and stop it there. He basically just goes on to list a bunch of different examples of mass shootings where the shooter was on some variation of psychotropic medicine or SSRIs or whatever it may be. But listen, I mean, this is, again, pretty simple. Same as the Laura Ingram example there. It's correlation without causation. You're saying a large amount of these mass shooters were prescribed prescription drugs, and then he's saying that those prescription drugs in and of themselves were the cause of the mass shooting, instead of just understanding that, hey, maybe mental illness does play a role in a lot of these mass shootings. Obviously, not everybody who has some sort of mental illness is violent in any way, shape, or form, but a lot of these mass shooters do have issues with mental illness. I think that's pretty obvious. You kind of got to be a little bit fucked up to go out and do a mass shooting. That's pretty much understood, but that's a correlation without causation, because of course people who are disproportionately doing mass shootings, if it's, a disproportionate amount of mass shooters are mentally ill, well then, yeah, it would make sense that at some point throughout their lives, they had been prescribed medicine to try to address those mental illnesses. This would much more be a case of those psychotropic or SSRI medications not really being effective than it would be a case of those medications inherently causing them to go out and do the mass shooting. So it's like a reverse correlation causation situation that he's putting forward here. And then, on top of that, he does throw in a bunch of other random explanations for why we have mass shootings. He blames, again, weed, like Laura Ingram did, blames the prescription medications, which, we do have a somewhat of a problem in this country with overprescribing of a lot of different various medications, but not in the way that he's characterizing in this clip. But he blames weed, he blames prescription drugs, he blames women, I guess, for, being condescending towards young men and saying that they're privileged or something like that. So using this as an opportunity to bash women for absolutely no goddamn reason. And, just pulling, again, everything out of his ass that he possibly can to not talk about guns. I mean, again, the underlying issue here is very consistent and obvious when you look at outside the context of the United States. It's like conservatives have no ability whatsoever to even look at other countries and what policies they've deployed, what level of gun ownership, what level of, the types of guns that they allow in their country for average random young teenagers to buy with ease, with basically no restrictions put in place. I mean, they have no ability to look externally to the United States for potential solutions. It's like they're living in their own little bubble here, and as if there's no potential policy solutions that could be put in place to address it. But that was just Tucker Carlson with his delusional take. And now we move on to probably the most delusional take of any of these conservative freaks over here. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and basically saying that the July 4th mass shootings were false flag attempts. So really searching for her inner Alex Jones in this one.
Now, here's what I have to say. I mean, 2 shootings on July 4th, one in a rich white neighborhood and the other at a fireworks display. Almost sounds like it's designed to persuade Republicans to go along with more gun control. I mean, after all, remember, we didn't see that happen at all the pride parades in the month of June, but as soon as we hit MAGA month, as soon as we hit the month that we're all celebrating, loving our country, we have shootings on July 4th. I mean, that would sound like a conspiracy theory, right? Of course. But what's the definition of a right-wing conspiracy theory? Well, by the way, it's the news that's just 6 months early.
Okay, well, if your characterization of conservative conspiracy theories is that it's the news 6 months early, I don't know, maybe go check with your buddy Alex Jones and see how that worked out for him in trying to claim that the mass shooting at the school, at the elementary school like 10 years ago, saying that was a false flag, directing a lot of his supporters to go harass the parents of a lot of the victims at that elementary school shooting. So, again, just completely deranged, delusional take here, literally trying to imply that it was a false flag attempt to, get conservatives to be on board with gun control. So, obviously, I guess you wouldn't expect much more than that from somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene. But, listen, these are some of the biggest and most influential figures within the conservative movement right here. You have Tucker Carlson, by far the most popular late-night talk show or late-night political commentator in the entire country, basically just doing, a conspiracy broadcast where he claims that weed and video games and prescription medications are the cause of mass shootings. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene out here doing her best Alex Jones impression, and at the end of the day, this is all just clearly a distraction so that they don't have to talk about the underlying issue of the amount of guns that we allow to exist in this country, the ease of access, where somebody who even had previous interactions with law enforcement, like this recent guy who did the July 4th shooting at the parade in Highland Park. He had previous interactions with police, and still that somehow wasn't enough to prevent him from legally going out and purchasing the gun that he then used to kill all of these people. So it's really not that complicated of an issue, and yet it's made out to be some sort of a grand societal level conspiracy or a grand societal level issue when it's really very simple. It comes down to guns. There's no other variable that you can use to compare why the United States has this amount of mass shootings. It's literally like a multiple a week at this point, if not multiple per day, that we have here in the United States, and somehow no other comparable OECD nations, Canada, the UK, Spain, France, Germany, Australia, any of these other countries, they don't have the same amount of mass shootings because they don't have the same amount of guns. I mean, it's really that fucking simple. And yet, even with that bipartisan piece of gun reform that Biden and a handful of Republicans joined on and passed through law, I mean, that's basically it in terms of actual gun reform legislation. And that was completely pathetic. It was watered down, didn't have the national enforcement of red flag laws, didn't have the assault weapons ban, didn't have even like putting more stringent regulations in place in terms of purchasing firearms. So none of the no universal background checks as well. So none of the most popular provisions that could have been included in a gun reform package that the overwhelming majority of the country wants to see. So again, we have pathetic bipartisanship as a potential solution to something that really should be pretty easy to solve if you think about it for more than 2 seconds.